Hey, and welcome to the Hearthstone Half Hour. I'm Hammy, and this is Failcraftcasts. Hope you're well and good. Tonight we are going to be taking a look at Mech Warrior and all of the things it entails. This is a deck list by Brainboy. If you're on YouTube, take a look in the description below. You can see the deck list, or I'll link it just in the middle here. If you're on Twitch, it's in chat. So without further ado, let's jump on in. Do what we always do, just do a run through the deck, how it works, how it can play, its strengths, its weaknesses, and then we're going to jump on in and play a couple of ladder games to try and show it in practice. Do always know that we're jumping into these a little bit new, so we're all learning together. I'm sure there'll be some mistakes in our matches, so please do point them out on YouTube. Good to see them. Okie dokie, so Mech Warrior. Firstly, Mech, as of Goblins versus Gnomes, if you're new to Hearthstone, gives lots of decks a very solid core. It can be a very early game aggressive offensive core. It can be a mid-game sort of pressuring core. There are lots of good mech cards, long story short, and we're going to take a look at those. And this deck, this Mech Warrior, as with a lot of mech decks since Goblins vs Gnomes released, tries to take the best of both worlds. It tries to jump in and take a look at warrior control and all of the good stuff that makes a control warrior really, really solid, and things like cheap minion removal. Warrior has a lot of cheap and effective spells that can remove minions from the table, control the opponent, and then tries to marry those together with the sort of aggressive early to mid-game core of a mech deck. And all of the mechanics that make mechs good. So what do mechs have? Mechs have things like buffing each other with the Screwjack Clunker. They have sometimes pretty solid health and stats in terms of attack for their mana cost, their point in the game at which they pop up, for example. So that's always good to see as well. So what happens if you try and squeeze two concepts together? You get something like this. It will mean that you can try and keep the table under control while dropping minions turn by turn by turn. So if we just have a think about Control Warrior, in the warrior spectrum you've got Control Warrior, which keeps the table under control until about, if you take a look on the mana curve, really turn 5 or turn 6, then you play big legend, big card, big card, big card, and those cards win the game for you. If you then take a look at the other end of things, you're looking at maybe a weapons warrior or an enrage warrior, and those kind of warriors pretty much rush and they go face, 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 face. We are hitting our opponent to the face as often as possible, as quickly as possible, and then getting rid of anything on the table that's in our way and that's not going to stop us from winning. Mech Warrior kind of falls in the middle. I wouldn't say it's a rush. I wouldn't say it's quite a tempo. Maybe you could say it's part tempo, part mid-range. It's tempo in the sense that you want to be dropping strong minions every single turn you can, if at all possible, and making them snowball and snowball and snowball into this mid-game. It's also kind of control-y in that you've got a real core. Okay, you don't have a Whirlwind, you do have Deathspite, but you've got a real core of control cards. So we'll quickly go through the cards in the deck, see roughly how it works, and then we're going to take it, I think we can take it into a ladder game. We'll take it into a casual game just to get warmed up, and then we'll take it into a ladder game to see what we actually run into. I'm only about rank 13, 12 on the ladder at the beginning of this new season right now, so we might get some good decks, we may get something interesting, we'll see. Okay, so in the early game for Mech Warrior, what are we doing? Executes warrior control in its prime. Destroy a damaged enemy minion. Doesn't matter how big or how nasty that minion is in terms of its health, it just needs damage on it and it's gone with an execute. So powerful control and cheap. Fulfills our cheap control. Neat. One shield slam. You could maybe go for a couple there and you can make a few tweaks around it, but shield slam, as good as the armour you have on your warrior, if you've armoured up massively, then Shield Slam can be doing loads of damage, but if your opponent hits you to the face on your hero and your armour is going down, then of course Shield Slam does a lot less. So it is kind of situational control. 2 Theory Win Axes, pretty self-explanatory. For 2 mana, these remove stuff left, right and centre in the early stage of the game. Very, very strong. Pretty much a 2-pick in any kind of deck. Next up, we've got Battle Rage. Drawing a card for each damaged friendly character. Good if you've got your minions down. Ideally in this deck you're going to be stacking minions turn by turn by turn by turn, and when you get to sort of midish game, maybe you've got a few minions down, remember your hero also counts as a damaged friendly character, so that can allow you to draw cards, and basically if you've got yourself in a good position it should push you further into a better position. In a worse comes to worse scenario, it's going to help you claw some cards back. just the one armor smith in here for armoring up. Ideally, you're going to be throwing that down with big minions on the table to stack a couple of armors up. Maybe set up your shield slam, maybe keep you in the game. Cruel Taskmaster ×2, use that with the dealing 1 damage, giving it 2 attack. You can use that to activate Grommash. Grommash plus Cruel Taskmaster for 10 mana equals 13 damage. Quite a key combo finisher for Control Warrior, or indeed most warriors who decide to run Grommash. So do remember that one. Taskmaster in a pinch, also with that 1 damage, can be used to just remove 1 health minions. So don't be afraid if you don't have anything else in your early game hand and you think you're playing a rush deck, an aggressive early game deck, keep hold of the Cruel Taskmaster and use that 1 damage to remove a minion from the table. It can be worth its weight in gold. Don't forget that not only are you removing a 1 health minion with that 1 damage on a Cruel Taskmaster, you're also putting a 2 attack, 2 health minion on the table that might be able to remove another minion. For those of you whether you're tuned in live or on YouTube, on the left is our dog Shep, and he has had dinner and he has also had his wash today, so he's been put under a shower head and put under a hairdryer, and yeah, it's all very exhausting for him, just too much. Right then, coming back into it, Mech Warper ×2. You want to be dropping Mech Warpers ideally when they're not going to get nuked off the table. If you drop a Mech Warper, it's a big control target for the very reason that your mechs cost 1 mana less. So this lets you bring more mechs into the battle with more speed. Mech Warper plus Harvest Golem, that's a 4 mana drop, of course, because the Harvest Golem costs 1 less. Ditto for Spider Tank. Mech plus Piloted is at 5 worth of drop, and so on and so forth. Screwdrink even as well, Piloted Sky, and if you've got a coin, then you can actually drop a Mech Warper and a Harvest Golem for 4 mana, of course, on turn 3. So you can get lots of minions out on the table very, very fast. Mech Warper is nice. Mech Warper is love and life when it comes to Mech Warper decks. Shield Block ×2, draw a card, armour up. Nothing bad about that whatsoever. Armour for your shield slamming fun. And of course, card draw in a card game is always good. 2 Harvest Golems, just a perennial, really strong 2-for-1. When it dies, you get a 2 attack, 1 health minion. Really, really nice. And of course, remember, you've got lots of mechs here that you're setting up that you can potentially buff later in the game to make stronger and nastier. Spider Tank 3/3/4 does whatever a Spider Tank does. 3 attack, 4 health. That is going to be making some very nice trades. If it's buffed, it could be trading really, really nicely as well with the Screwjank later. Deathspite, Control Warriors, lovely new weapon, of course, with Curse of Necks. Death Rat of dealing 1 damage to all, that can be annihilating boards of small health minions. That can be triggering your own armor smith on all of your minions as well, so it's nice and pressuring in a lot of different ways. 4 attack will certainly remove some chunky big minions off the table as 2, and if you need to swing against a 5 health minion, remember, when this dies, if you do 4 attack damage to a 5 health minion, then the 1 damage to all minions picks it up at the end, so it's good. Piloted Shredder ×2, throw it down. Death Rat of summoning a random 2 cost. It's another 2-for-1 card, and that random 2 cost most of the time is going to be something that you can use to trade, and if you don't get the board under control with that trade, then you're going to be further ahead by having the Piloted Shredder down. So this is good for taking board control and keeping it there nice and strong. The Screwjank is the warrior specific Goblins vs Gnomes mech. Give a friendly mech 2/2. You can see how many mechs we've got. That's obviously a benefit, but don't forget as well that with 2 attack and 5 health, that's actually pretty good at trading away small to mid-sized minions as well. So it's a body on the table that you can use to start trading away minions, get table control as well if you need. Not bad at all. Harrison, it belongs in a museum. This is a Harrison Jones in his glory days, not in his Harrison Jones Kingdom of the Crystal Skull days, shall we say, when you don't want to push a film series too far. Just saying. But Harrison is really very good against Paladin, Hunter, mirror matches in terms of warrior, anything that has weapons. It will very much help you in terms of removing that weapon. Drawing up those cards will be very, very awesome as well. So getting the card draw, hey, if your opponent's got a 3 attack, 2 health Fury Wind Axe on the table, you get 2 cards and destroy the weapon. And of course all of the other nasty weapons that are out there. Paladins, you name them. Harrison Jones destroys them, eats them up, and gives you cards in the bargain. Just make sure you don't mill through your hand. You don't want to be discarding cards with Harrison Jones just because you've got too many cards in your hand, and then you're trying to draw and draw and draw. As Tilly says live on Twitch, Harrison for those weaponed rogues, absolutely. Also been mentioned. Various thoughts on Indiana Jones there. as well. But yes, weapon rogues actually, pirate rogues as well, quite popular in this February 2015 meta and January meta as well. So good against rogues as well, seeing a bit of a comeback. Piloted Sky Golem, like piloted Shredder, but random 4 cost, 6 attack, 4 health. You can get all kinds of evil 4 cost minions dropping when this thing dies if it has not been silenced. So another good card for pressuring, and really in this mid-game stage at about 6 mana you're going to be using these cards, ideally if you've got control of the table, hammering to your opponent's face, looking to get health down and really using them to push forward for the win. Then Shield Maiden, just the one situational, Battle Cry of gaining 5 armor, 5 attack, 5 health. The minion will hopefully trade other minions on the table or be some good damage to your opponent. So Crush, destroying a minion as well. If you've got a damage minion, this costs 4 less, so you're pretty much going to have a damage minion on the table at some point or another. Crush, I'm experimenting with. Brainboy has used it in his list. It's also in my Control Warrior. If you have a damage minion, then this comes out very early in the game and you can remove some nasty minions with it. And remember that this is just straight up destroy a minion. So if it's something with a divine shield or something that you'd have to take a first blow at or do some first damage to before you can then just remove it from the table, then Crush will just remove that in one go. So let's say a Tyrion Fordring. A Lannister always pays his debts unless Crush is involved, in which case he's just wiped away straight away. Finally, to finish off, we've got Dr. Boom, everyone's favourite Goblins versus Gnomes, sort of 7-drop in so many decks. This, if you're ahead, gets you further ahead. If you're behind, it can trade you back. So that is pretty solid. You will see this in so many decks, but here you're using it to push forward for your victory again. And then last but not least, Grommash Hellscream, the very angry chap that he is. You can see a little bit of battle rage in his eyes there, and if you enrage, +6. So if he takes damage, he goes from 4 attack to 10, and then if he is enraged by Cruel Taskmaster, then he actually goes from 4 attack to a beautiful total of 12, if my maths is correct. I think I might have said 13 there. Deal 1 damage +2 attack, so he gets 6 and then 12. So that is our little run through of Mech Warrior. So remember that our goal is, in early game, keep table under control, make sure that we are throwing down solid minions every turn that we can, make sure that we're keeping the table under control with our nice weapons, our nice cheap control. 2, and then in the mid to mid late game we should have piloted shredders, we should have sky golems, we should have all of these big and nasty things, and they should be pushing forward to make us a victory before we get to sort of turn 8, 9 and 10 hopefully, and then that way madness lies and the game will become a lot harder for us. Okay, so we've gone through the deck run through, we're now going to do a casual game to see it in action, and then finally we'll jump into maybe a ladder game or 2 depending on how confident I am feeling in what's going on. Okay, so mulligan strategy. What do we do? Well, we're playing a mage in this example. I'm going to assume that this is a mech or a rush mage, and therefore I want early game control options. Now, Spider Tank doesn't quite fit an early game control option. I would like a Cruel Taskmaster, a Fury War Axe, or failing that, a Mech Warper. I'm actually going to go for a full-on mulligan. If I was going to keep one thing in that hand, it would have been that Spider Tank. And with a Cruel Taskmaster and an Armor Smith, it's feeling a little bit better. We've got out and a Mech Warper as well. That's a nice early game set of cards. The only way it can be better is if we were going second. Okay, so let's see what our mage is up to. Remember, of course, we're playing in casual mode. This could be a playtesting player, it could be a brand new player, we just don't know. So this won't be reflective of this deck's performance in a laddery kind of situation, but we'll play some ladder games in a bit. So I'm going to go for an Armor Smith, pretty hard unless my opponent has a Flame Cannon, the Goblins versus Gnomes Magey card. Having said that, oh, in comes a coin, we're going to see a 3-drop, buffs it up, maybe a Frostbolt, Kirin Tor Mage, and interesting that my opponent has played that Kirin Tor Mage. There we go, free secret as well. So we've got a Secrets Mage of some kind of types. Okay, we've not seen a secret mage for a while. So I can start making trades. I don't know what the secret is. So in terms of mage secrets, how do we play around it? If we throw down a minion, if we attack the hero and it dies, then it's vaporized. I'm not going to be attacking the hero just yet. There is of course ice armor. Ice Barrier, when your heroes attack, gain 8 armor. Mirror Entity, when your opponent plays a minion, summon a copy. That is a possibility. Counterspell. Duplicate, I think, is also an opportunity as well. When a friendly minion dies, put 2 copies in your hand. I'm going to try and... given what we've seen recently in Ladder and similar, I'm going to say that that might be Mirror Entity. So let's take a little butcher and see what's up. Okay, Battle Rage isn't going to be doing anything for me. Mech Warrior isn't removing anything. Firstly, I don't mind too much if my opponent summons a copy of Cruel Taskmaster. Okay, so we played that. Immediately we know, at least, that it's not a mirror entity. So duplicate, when a friendly minion dies, put 2 in hand. Spellbender, Ice Block. I'm not going to be attacking hero. Really, I think I'm going to remove this, and then we'll very soon see if it's a duplicate. It is a duplicate, so 2 of those go back into my opponent's hand. Would I prefer 2 of those or 2 of these? I probably would have preferred 2 of those, but I got rid of the threat, so I was assuming that was a duplicate. Maybe a bit of a misplay there. Okay, so maybe a slight misplay. Should have probably removed that. And in comes, that's now buffed up to 4 attacks, slammed in. Going to be doing some nasty control with that. I've not got any of my... I've got my win axe down, which is nice. Okay, so I'm just going to do some control here. Let's get the table under control. I'm going to, of course, be low on health. But next turn I can Mech Warrior into Screwdrank, and then we've got a nice little solid couple of minions on the table there. Shield Block could also go for that as well. Here comes an Arcane, 2-card draw, 1 mana, so nothing else probably going to be happening this turn. This gives me the opportunity to get my table under control, get my sort of general things in order. So there we go, now I have a 4 attack and 5 health Mech Warrior. I quite like that because that's going to make that quite tough unless my opponent decides to Fireball or maybe go for a Polymorph or something similar. It's going to be pretty tough to remove that, and that will in turn mean that I can get my Piloted Sky Golem down next turn, or I can even just go for a Shield Block, Armour Up, and then I've got a nice core of damage on the table. In comes a Poly. Right, I said that a Poly would be one of the only things that would remove it, so the good thing is that the Poly is gone, so it may feel a bit of a bummer when one of your nice minions gets polyed, but on the bright side I know that unless my opponent's playing 2 Polymorph, and I've not seen many decks recently with 2 Polymorph, but it is possible. I know that 1's down at least, so any other cards I'm playing are less likely to get crowd controlled. Let's see what our opponent does with this 6 mana drop. Okay, and oh, look at that. How was that for lucking out? So we got a 4-drop and it was a Water Elemental. Obviously even better if that's against a weapon stack, but I can just go and freeze my opponent now. Wonderful, absolutely loving that. Piloted Shredder feels strong. Of course the 2-for-1 ability, you've just seen the 2-for-1 with that, and there we go. So, opponents seeded there, don't know what they had in hand. Remember, of course, we are playing in casual, so we saw a little bit as to how that could work. We managed to get the table stable. We then managed to push forward a little bit. We got our big win conditions down. We teamed up, and then we got into a very nice position where we could push forward for the win. So get the table under control, drop minions as you can. We managed to get the table back under control after a bit of a hairy early start, and then admittedly got a little bit lucky with RNGesus with the older Water Elemental dropping. Okay, so now, after that, ladder time. This is rank 13, in case you didn't see. Right, mulligan strategy. Well, nothing too wrong. We're playing a priest. I'm going to assume this is a Death Rattling Priest or one of those evil combos. I don't mind these too much. I've got a curve in and of itself. I'm going to take a risk, throw those 2 back, and hope that we can get a Theory Winax. 2 shield blocks is not exactly ideal. Okay, that's not going to be hugely useful, but I've got a Taskmaster into a shield block. Priests Priests on ladder at the moment. The Death Rattle Priest with Undertaker has been a little bit removed. But there's still Death Rattling variants, control variants, so priests are not to be sniffed at. Nothing on the table, so I'm not going to throw out a Taskmaster for no reason. However, shield block into turn 3 gets my card drawing. I may Death Spite turn 4, that may help me remove some things. For example, we've got a 3-drop coming down from our priest. What's it going to be? Thought Steel, nasty. So who knows what could be coming up from our priest now. They've nicked 2 cards at random. I'm going to shield block, and Piloted Shredder is good. I can just drop that next turn unless a minion drops from my opponent that I really want to remove. So I've got Death Spite, which is good. Remember, there are some nasty things like the Dark Cultist, the Death Rattling minion that buffs your opponent's cards. So I cannot drop both of these in one go. I'm going to go for one of those. I can drop both of those next turn. Mech Warrior into Screwjunk Clunker. Remember, like we did last game. So this is a nice minion against priests because my opponent got a Death Spite. So if I drew Harrison Jones, I can actually benefit from my opponent's Thought Steal. And in comes, funnily, the Sorcerer's Apprentice. That's actually kind of handy. We've now got loads of free spells, or cheaper spells certainly. So that is going to wreck something and then deal lots of damage to lots of minions in general. I think that instead of the cheap shield block, I'm still going to go for this play. Because neither of those, well, one of those is removable if it's attacked directly, and I assume my opponent will go for the Mech Warrior because it's higher attack and because it gives that benefit of mechs costing 1 less. So even though I've gone from that, my opponent's going to remove 1, I would imagine. There we go, Whirlwind comes in. My opponent's drawn an Execute, they've really lucked out. 5-5. Both of those 3 attack could be Shadow Word Pain very easily. Holy Nova as well. No, Loteb, just going for the straight spell denial approach. So Battle Rage will let me draw cards. I can Taskmaster into some removal. That could be interesting. Tell you what, here's an interesting one. I'm going to get my weapon down and just... Oh, hang on, I almost made a horrible mistake there. The horrible mistake would be destroying my own minion. I was thinking that had 2 health rather than 1. So, almost messed that up. I've got lots of armour, which is still good. In fact, I'm just going to go for this kind of removal. So we'll go for the correct play, which is actually doing this. Okay, so we've actually controlled our opponent's minions, although our opponent I think has had a bit of a rough start. They've really not played too much in the first 2 or 3 turns. Down goes a Holy Nova, strafing things out of the way. In comes an Execute as well. And now we've seen, card counting wise, we've seen the 2 Thought Stolen cards. So they've actually benefited my opponent rather nicely. Shield block, well, my character isn't damaged, so Battle Rage isn't actually going to help me there. I therefore just have to shield block. Crush helps me with control. I don't really want to Screwjank unless I've got something that I want to put some pressure on. I'm going to drop that, and the reason for that is if I damage it, I can Battle Rage next turn. I've lost a 2-2 buff, and if I start drawing mechs, I'm going to be slightly sad. We've got lots of control here, but what we really don't have is down goes the Belcher. Okay. Okay, so the Piloted Sky we have, very, very nice indeed. Battle Rage will let me draw. If I just throw down a Sky, I could just crush this out the way and trade it. Correct play to make. The Sky could get deathed, could get removed. If I crush this, I feel that Priest has lots of nasty to come, and Crush will come in handy then. So for those slightly ponderous reasons, I can execute this actually, which I shall do. Just get that out of the way. And then that can get removed, you can trade, we'll see how those go. Okie dokie. Oh, and Vol'jin comes in. Right, that's not as awful as it could be, but when we see a spell played after this, I'm expecting a Power Word Shield. No, a 1 trade, but then the powered shield should come in, yes, and then that triggers this to do the 1 damage across the board. Unbeknownst to my opponent, I have another execute, so Vol'jin is not going to last very long. I get a Goblin Blast Mage of all things. They get the power, of course, sadly, and a Dock Boom as well, so I feel that we have some options here. I'm going to throw down Dock Boom and just say, right, now face or trade? Face or trade? Face. Reason for face, if my opponent does decide to attack, I'll start removing these. We could see a big game Hunter, we could see a Shadow of Death. There we go, so there's a decent game. Oh, try and pop in a well played there. 1-0 rank point. There goes a Rogue or Warrior dominance. So there we go. Thank you so much for tuning in. There we have taken a quick look at Mech Warrior. We've taken a look at how this deck works turn by turn. We've then jumped on in to take a look at it and then had a nice little game of it in casual mode, and then we just played 1 ladder game. We will play some more ladder games with this, I think, later in the week, so I will give a shout on Twitter when that is, or if you're on YouTube, have a look at twitch.tv/Feldcraftcast. So where can you find this deck list? This was courtesy of Brainboy. Bunch of fun. Really recommend that you try it out. In terms of the cards that it needs, it does have a couple of legends in there, it's true, but those are swappable. The core of that deck, a lot of people can grab and play. So if you're live, don't go away. We're going to be doing a game of Heroes of the Storm and having some fun of that in a bit. But thank you so much for tuning in to this Hearthstone half hour. If you're on YouTube, do come join us. And where can you find us? Just to pop back to the Sleeping Shep, you can have a look at twitch.tv/Feldcraftcast. Monday through Friday on the schedule in the bottom of that left column. You can see at Feldcraftcast on Twitter when we're going to go live. Or if you're live, check out youtube.com as Shep decides to have a little roll over there. /Feldcrum. We have the Hearthstone half hour, a 2-minute version of this guide as well as a bunch of other stuff too, so tune in there, some Heroes of the Storm as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're live, don't go away. If you're on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment, let us know what you thought, what you'd like to see more of, or what you think we could improve. Whether you loved it or hate it, it's all valuable. Thank you for tuning in.